I'm Jacob's Quest, and tonight we just got finished watching episode 7 of The Acolytes, and wow, okay, lots to talk about. Yeah, so this is the second half of our flashback. This one is called Choice, whereas episode 3 was called Destiny, I believe. So you have Destiny and Choice, you get it. This entire show has been working with opposite titles for each thing. And yeah, this one did its job for the flashback. I was not disappointed at all in a lot of the stuff we got. We do still have some questions. You know, we do still have, like, for example, how were the twins created? We have more information about, like, what the twins are, but we don't know how they were created yet. And that feels like it's going to be very important. We do learn that the reason the Jedi were on Bryndock all those years ago was because they discovered that this planet had life, whereas 100 years prior, due to a hyperspace accident, if you've read the High Republic books, you know that there was a very famous hyperspace accident that happened. This planet was deemed lifeless. There was no life on it, and now suddenly there's a forest and there's plants everywhere, and they're saying that only a virgins in the Force could have created life on this planet. And they say that a virgins in the Force is just a concentration of force around a certain location. Now, of course, we've heard this term before in The Phantom Menace. Qui-Gon goes in front of the council and says, "I've discovered a virgins in the Force," and then Mace Windu says, what, around a person, this boy, right? So, like, even then they're kind of saying it's not always a person necessarily. Sometimes it is a location. You could sort of say places like Dagobah and stuff like that might be considered virginses in the Force. These places that are like hyper focused on, like, oh, there's just a lot of Force energy here, right? So that's what they think that's going on Bryndock, and the Jedi are kind of, they have all these like metal detectors out looking for, I guess, their virgins in the Force, and that's what their mission there was. And only then do they see that, oh, there's people here, there's these children, and then we actually see the matching scenes of episode 3. So we're getting a lot of context filled in around episode 3, and that's pretty much what this entire episode is. It's just filling in the context of, like, okay, we saw Sol seeing them in the forest. Here's what led up to that moment. So, unlike a lot of people kind of assumed that the Jedi went there because they cinched the twins, no, they didn't even know the twins were there. They were there looking for whatever's giving this planet life. They're like, there's a virgins of the Force here. Something's going on, and we're here to study it. That's what we do. So they find that these twins are there, and Sol kind of sneaks around and he sees a bunch of other stuff that they're doing. They're doing their Force training and all these other events that he witnessed. Of course, we didn't know he was there in episode 3, but he was just off screen. He was just way over there in the background looking at all this. And so, of course, he reports back saying, like, hey, not only are we not alone, but there's a Force cult here. I think they're witches. And they say something interesting here, where, like, they're like Night Sisters, and they're like, well, hold on, let's not jump to conclusions. The Night Sisters, they say that the Night Sisters don't raise younglings, let alone train them, which, it's interesting, because now I'm thinking back to, like, okay, well, we have Ventress, and now Ventress was sold when she was a child. She, you know, she was Mother Talzin's, right? And she was sold away, and she, you know, she lived with, like, a pirate for a minute, and then she was trained by a Jedi after that. You know, so Ventress was not raised on that planet. She just came back as an adult. And then I'm thinking about, like, okay, well, what about, what's her name from The Mandalorian? We saw her as a young adult, and she had her mom there, but we don't see her as a kid, like a small child, right? So I'm trying to think of, like, well, I guess that's a thing. I don't know. I'm thinking back now. I'm like, I guess we've never seen a small child with the Night Sisters. Maybe they always end up selling their young and wait for the day that they'll come back to them as adults. I don't know. It's very interesting. Of course, Mother Talzin famously gave Darth Maul away to Sidious, right? Like, so, like, I guess they're right. I guess I just never really thought that, like, oh yeah, I guess the Night Sisters don't have younglings around. You know, we just have so many characters that were, like, connected to the Night Sisters, but yeah, I guess they weren't ever really there as children. Ventress and Darth Maul were both sold and given away, so, like, yeah, okay, makes sense, I guess. Interesting. Anyways, so they think maybe they're Night Sisters. They just know that they're witches, and they go there, and basically episode 3 plays out again, but from the Jedi's perspective. They're like, well, we have to contact the council, and we can use we want to test them just to buy time, because we need to talk to the council and figure out, like, what do you want us to do, because these children might be in danger. We don't know what this Force cult is going to do to these kids, or what's going on here. Of course, the council ends up telling them, don't interfere, don't do anything. But Soul kind of has this instant connection to Osha. He can sense, like, oh, you're gonna be my Padawan. I know you're gonna be my Padawan. That's gonna happen. And so he kind of instantly becomes like overly protective of her, to the point where he's like, I have to stop this. Whatever they're doing, it's not safe. And May kind of lets something slip here, which is interesting. So when May's being tested, she says something about like, oh, we're gonna become the leaders of this coven, and we have to go through fear, and people have to sacrifice themselves for the betterment of all, or something like that. And it kind of gives you the impression, and this might be what was going to happen, that these two girls were going to be sacrificed. And they don't confirm that, but something else happens later in this episode that makes me believe, like, yeah, they might have almost sacrificed these two girls, and we'll talk about that in a second. So, basically, episode 3 is playing out. Osha wants to be a Jedi, May doesn't. Osha passes, and Torben, oh, poor Torben. He's a Padawan who doesn't want to be on this mission. They've been here for 7 weeks. They've been here for 7 weeks, guys. Okay, that's, we've been here for pretty much 2 months now. On this planet, finding nothing, and now we find this coven of witches, and they even talk about how their blood, the twins' blood, not only do they have a high M count, right, but they're symbionts, right? They kind of mention symbionts in the Force, the Phantom Menace. We are symbionts with them. Anyways, but their symbionts are identical, and they're like, well, yeah, they're twins. Like, no. Even twins would have different symbionts. So like, basically what they're implying is like these two girls were artificially created, and somehow they divided. They like their little poem that they sing, like born as two but always one, or something like that. Like that was very literal, it seems. Like they were literally one person, maybe when they were born, and then they were magically divided into two people, which, again, we don't know how that happened or what the witches did to do that. Are the Sith involved? I feel like at this point they have to be, because we don't know what the Vergence in the Force is. And they say that only a Vergence in the Force could have accomplished something like artificially creating this life here, right? So whatever this Vergence in the Force is, and whatever helped create these twins, whatever's happening here on Bryndock, we never find out. And it must, I don't know, at this point it's like it has to be a Sith, or there has to be some kind of magic cave somewhere. Like, I don't know what happened here on this planet, and we only got one more episode. So like, I really hope that, I don't know, maybe Chimere is like fighting one of them, or giving some speech. He's got the Sith speech that he's gonna give, his supervillain speech, and he's gonna be like, oh, and yeah, my master helped your coven create them. We used this dark cave on Bryndock, and we used your coven to create life, and that's why all these plants started blooming, and that's how these children were born. Like, life was created, literally, and something. Like, I don't know how this is gonna play out with one episode left, but these are like big questions we still have. We got a lot of answers, and that's really good. Like, I'm happy we got so many answers, but I'm like, oh man, how were they created? And how are the Sith going to be involved with this? Because it feels like there's still one piece of the puzzle that is missing here. And we got one episode, so like, yeah, I really hope that they fill that piece of the puzzle, because it's right there. Anyways, so what we end up seeing here, and this is kind of the other interesting thing about like why I do think the twins were about to be sacrificed, or at the very least May was about to be sacrificed, because she was the only one who had ascended. She was the one who had like gone through the process and was given the mark, and they said like, oh, she's gonna become the next leader. all this stuff, I think they also meant that in maybe somewhat of a literal way, because basically what we have is Torben speeds off to the Witch Coven, Soul goes after him, both of them are there, and they're basically like, alright, let's grab the twins and let's get out of here. Like, I need to protect Osha, and these twins are our key to like figuring out what the hell this Virgins is. We need to grab them and leave, because I don't trust these witches, right? They're evil and dark and whatever. So they're about to start a fight with Mother Coral, who is the Zabrak one. Torben's about to start a fight with her, and Mother Anastasia does this thing where she like, and again, it's not clear what was happening, what she was trying to accomplish, because, and I had to rewind the scene. Here's what happens. She turns into smoke, and she seems to be trying to stop the fighting from starting, and it cuts to May, who's across the walkway, and May also starts turning into smoke. If you go watch the scene again, May's arm and her sides are starting to turn into smoke, just like Mother Anastasia just did. And I don't know if she was about to absorb May's power or what was about to happen. I think like it was a literal sacrifice was about to go down. But Soul, who looks at May and notices that like, oh, she's turning into smoke, stabs where Mother Anastasia was and kills her before whatever process can be completed. And so of course that starts this big fight. So they fight off Mother Coral, and then all the witches disappear. Mother Coral turns into smoke herself, and she's gone. And the next thing we know, Kalnaka's there, and of course we see the scene from the trailers where Kalnaka is possessed by the witches, and now all the witches are in this room, and they're all like possessing Kalnaka together. And I guess this is more of an immediate like, because they did this earlier with Torben, but for Torben they had to like talk to him and convince him to like, oh, don't you want to leave this place? Don't you want to go to Coruscant? And they had to like convince him to be under their spell. Whereas Kalnaka is more of an immediate like, oh, grab your lightsaber, attack, you know? So like all the witches, like all 20 of them are sitting there like under like meditating, and they have Kalnaka under control, and they have to do a pretty cool fight where Kalnaka's fighting Soul and Torben. And then Master Indara shows up, and she does something interesting. She's able to like subdue Kalnaka and use the Force to, I guess, clear his mind. And she can like sense that the witches are controlling him. And then when Kalnaka becomes free, all the witches like die, I guess. Like their connection to Kalnaka was just severed in that moment. Now that's pretty interesting too. So, you know, a lot of people are complaining like, how'd those witches die? They didn't die in the fire. I'm like, well, they'll probably explain that. And here we go. They did explain that. So yes, I guess it was just being forcefully removed from Kalnaka's mind, like destroyed theirs. I don't really know. Some force connection was severed, and the witches all died from that. Now I will say, they do mention very quickly that this was an old mining station. They talk about how like, oh, the lift, yeah, like this whole place must have been like some kind of mining thing. So when May starts that fire, it does indeed, like I suspected, it does indeed start a larger fire inside of all the electronical components inside the door, because I suspected that's what would have happened. So the electronics in the door catch on fire, and that seems to kind of just spread throughout the facility. And whatever this mining facility was, whatever they were mining, it wouldn't be funny if it was cortosis. Anyways, whatever they were mining must have been explosive of some kind of flammable mineral that the whole mining facility is just like exploding all over the place, and that's where you see all the rubble and all the flames and stuff. Now that, again, that's not what killed the witches. The witches were killed by Kalnaka's, connection breaking, but yeah, that's what basically destroys this whole facility. So when Osha sees this in episode 3, she thinks that the explosion killed them all. Of course, that's not what happened. So Mother Coral seems to just disappear. And that's the other thing, is that I watched the scene again, she does not seem to be in that group of witches that die from the Kalnaka breaking the Force connection. She's not there. She just disappeared into some smoke. So I think anyone placing bets that she is somehow involved with the Sith, or maybe she's going to be the Sith Master, or something, if I think it's pretty good bet that she's gonna show up next episode in present day, and I don't know, somehow she's involved with the Sith. I don't think that she's gonna end up being Plagueis or whatever else, or Tenebris or whatever. I don't think she's gonna end up being one of them. I think she's just gonna show up and like, oh, she's the one who explained to Chimere everything that happened. Because that's the other thing. Chimere somehow knows all of this. He knows everything that happened. He knows everything that Soul did. And the only way that could be possible is if he was told that by Mother Coral. That's the only way that this makes sense, right? So either that is his master, or she's like another accomplice of whatever Sith master Chimere has. So very fascinating stuff. And then we get, I think this is really the only moment here, like aside from like, Soul kind of instantly had this connection, and he essentially forced his way to taking Osha away from this coven, even though the council said, and this is another thing they addressed, the council's like, no, don't interfere, and also they're too old. Master Indara directly says that they're too old to begin the training, which was another thing a lot of people had a problem with. Like, aren't they so old? Like, doesn't this step on what Anakin was doing? Like, yeah, they directly say that. They address that entirely. I don't know. Anyways, so this is the one moment where I'm like, okay, Soul, I think like this is the one thing we can say, like, oh man, not that you had much of a choice here, but I mean the episode's name is Choice, so maybe you did, but it doesn't look good for you. So both girls are on the railway, and in episode 3 it just looks like one of the railways gave up and fell down, and that's when May fell, right? But it turns out Soul was holding both of those railways up, but he could not keep them up forever, and the whole place was collapsing. So he had to make a choice, and he chose May, or he chose Osha, and May fell, and she's gone. And that's when we see Soul like holding onto the platform and being able to barely catch onto Osha, which it's kind of funny. Like, a lot of people were complaining, again, a lot of the complaints that people had in episode 3 were addressed in this episode. So it's almost like having more context like filled in a lot of people's, I don't know, it's just kind of funny how that works, right? Anyways, so yeah, he made the choice. Like, that's like, I think that's like really the big thing against Soul right now. It's like, oh my god, yeah, you chose one of the twins, right? You did oh man, what's The Good Son? Is that Macaulay Culkin movie where like they're both hanging over the cliff, and you gotta choose? Do you choose Elijah Wood or do you choose Macaulay Culkin? All right, you chose Elijah Wood. Macaulay Culkin falls. Like, that's that's what happened here with Soul. He chose Osha. Yeah, and that's pretty much where we leave things. Like, Soul wants to confess immediately to the council, and Master Indara says, "Look, man, you did all this. We were not even supposed to go back there. We were told not to interfere. We were just supposed to let whatever's happening happen. And you and Torben decided to go over there anyways, and you went inside and you caused all of this, okay? So don't turn yourself in now, because then this girl literally has nothing left. Right now, all she's holding on to is the fact that maybe she gets to become a Jedi now. Her sister's gone, her whole coven's gone. She thinks everyone's dead, so the only thing she has left is the Jedi. So at least let her have that. So don't turn yourself in. It's too late now, And that's pretty much how we end up in this situation where everyone has died, but this group of Jedi agree to keep it a secret from the council. And so they've held on to that. So now Torben, who was essentially, you could say Torben was mainly the one responsible for going back there, because he rushed off because he so desperately wanted to leave this mission and get back to Coruscant. Master Torben ends up exiling himself into the Barash Vow, and he's meditating, and then when he sees that May's alive, he's like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll just take this poison. Like, I deserve it. It's my bad. It was pretty much my fault entirely. So very interesting. Very, very interesting. And of course, none of them seem to have known that May survived. That was another thing I thought the Jedi might have been covering up, but that does not appear to be the case. None of them knew that. So when Indara sees May at the very beginning, she sees that mark. That really is her reacting to like, oh shit, you're alive. How are you alive? What? You know? Because she knows that May is the one who had the mark and Osha is the one who did not have the mark. She knows that. Anyways, so yeah, I don't know. Soul. Look, I understand that in the moment you cannot hold up both of those rafters forever. The place is collapsing and you kind of have to make a choice at a certain point. I get that, but I think the fact that you know, you chose to save one and you let the other one fall, and the second that both of these girls find this out, right? Like you know, May, she kind of knows some truth to this, but she doesn't know everything. She knows that Soul is the one that stabbed Mother Anastasia. She saw that. So that explains why she's like, oh yeah, the Jedi did this. They came in, they started killing people. Like, that's what happened. That's what May knows. Of course, Osha doesn't know any of this. So when Osha is told all this by Chimere, which I suspect will happen at the beginning of next episode, yeah, I don't know, man. She's gonna... I don't see any way that she stays good after this. You know, like, I think this is, like, her true dark path. She's gonna become the Acolyte, you know? And maybe she helps Chimere kill whatever Sith Master he has, you know? So whatever... If we see Darth Tenebrous, it might be for only a minute, because, like, he might immediately get attacked by Osha and Chimere. I don't know. Very interesting. And also, yeah, I don't see any way that Soul is left alive. Like, I feel like Soul is definitely going to end up dying, and he's going to end up being the scapegoat that Vernestra Rose says, like, yeah, I guess Soul did kill all these people, right? Because, like, she doesn't know what happened on the Wookiee planet, Jungle Planet. She doesn't know what ended up happening there, how all those Jedi ended up dying. You know, so, like, we might end up just having to go with the Padawan's suggestion that, like, did Soul do this? Like, who else could have taken on all these Jedi? Like, shit, might have been Soul. And without any other leads, that might end up being what they come to, is that, like, yeah, Soul ran away with the twins. Now, the other question I have is, like, how much does Vernestra know? Because Vernestra was not there on Bryndock, so, like, did Soul just tell her this stuff at some point, and she also agreed to keep this from the council? Because, like, that's her whole thing, right? She's all like, hey, her nickname might as well be let's not tell the council. Like, that's pretty much Vernestra Rose's nickname at this point. So maybe they told her, I don't know. But yeah, we have a lot of answers. I still have some questions. What was the vergence of the Force on this planet? Are the twins the vergence in the Force? Or is it, like the Jedi said, is the vergence in the Force something that's on the planet that helped create the twins? And this is another thing I feel like is going to kind of get misconstrued within the fandom. In the Phantom Menace, the vergence in the Force was Anakin himself. Like, he is the presence of, like, oh, there's a concentration of Force right here. It's weird. And it's Anakin himself. Now, the creation of the twins, they said, could only be created by a vergence in the Force. So it's like a third aspect that is creating the twins. And whatever that is the vergence in the Force. So I don't know. Very fascinated to find out what the deal with that is. Is it going to end up being like, oh no, it is the twins. It's just that it's two people that were like, or it's one person that was split into two people. Man, very, very fascinating. It feels like this is going to be the episode where a lot of people turn on Soul and they're like, oh, the witches weren't doing anything wrong. The witches are totally innocent. But again, I don't think that that's entirely true. If you look at that scene again, if you look at how May was turning into smoke, I am getting the impression, at least, that no, May was about to get, like, absorbed or something. Like, I think she was about to be sacrificed to Mother Asaya, yeah. So I don't know. I have a lot to think about. I really enjoyed this one for the answers it gave, but with only one episode left in this show and still several questions, I'm curious what the final episode is going to choose to focus on, because we want to know Sith stuff. but also I still, you know, how did you create the twins? They ask that question and they still don't quite get an answer, and we're like waiting. So are the Sith involved with the creations of the twins? Are they gonna say that Plagueis is really old, he's like still alive somehow, and Plagueis is the virgins in the Force and he helped create life? Are they gonna say that? Maybe. I wouldn't be mad at that. Or are they gonna say that Mother Corrin is Plagueis? That's also possible. Now, I will say I prefer that to not be the case, because if she, you know, she's a witch and then the Sith, when would that transition have happened? Of like, you know, this witch coven is not the Sith. The Sith are already a separate group out there, so like it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me for like her to now be the Sith master, because I'm like, well, when did that happen? You know, like, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if, like a lot of people theorizing, the Sith are involved in helping this coven create life, and that's kind of how Brendok became how it is. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. Let me know your theories. Let me know how you feel about Master Soul in this moment, and let me know what you think. Mother Coral is. What is her level of involvement from here on out? Because she appears to still be alive. She disappeared, right? Are you satisfied with this half of the flashback? I am. I feel like I got a lot of answers. I'm still left with some questions because we got one episode left. I am kind of nervous. I'm like, okay. I hope you I hope you give us. I'm not expecting every answer to be given. You know, I'm not sitting here being like, okay, you have to answer these 7 things. But at least like the bigger things of like, how does Chimere know this? What happened to Mother Coral? How were the twins created? Like those are the things I feel like you got to answer those. You know, you don't need to, like, you know, how long have the Sith and the witches known each other? Like, you can leave some of that up to the imagination, I guess. But oh man, 1 episode left. I was really happy with this episode, and it's fascinating. You know, it's kind of funny. Like, I think back to the reaction of episode 3. I'm like, wow, it's fascinating what watching the show and letting it unfold and seeing the context of things. It's fascinating how many questions do get answered. How many wild assumptions certain people made now seem very silly. I mean, they already seemed silly, but now they seem really, really silly. You know, like just wait for the show to tell you what's gonna happen, and it'll be okay. It'll be okay. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Bye.